Well, guys, we'll all just jump in
Yeah,
jump
you
in
might
as
as well
we
leave
go and ask questions.
Ask me questions and I'll answer them to the best I can
Yeah.
tell you.
Well, first of all, tell us who you are and where we are, and a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Carter Hall. Live here in head of Big Leatherwood at Delphia, Kentucky. Born and raised 1936. And I've lived here all my life, little army life, and tried Chicago out. And 6 months I said, this ain't no place for me. I'm a hillbilly and I'm going to go back to the hills. And then I got back here and got a, Noe Mayhew was a superintendent at that time for Blue Diamond Coal Company. He was up here at the, we called it Tilford. When Jewel Ridge came in here, they made the post office Tilford up here. And we still had this Delphi post office, but they had to have one for the mines, Cali, up there, a lot of traffic, and so he gave me a job. I was working outside, reading meters, and I had to count. Blue Diamond did, but that was my job. I guess it called me a flunky at that time. But getting started, the big thing is that one of the first coal companies came in here was Four Seam Coal Company down at Hazard. And didn't have no backhoes. Them men they picked and shoveled to hunt the bloom of the coal, you see, where they could mine it. And then Jewel Ridge Coal Company come in after that from Jewel Ridge, Virginia. They came in here and set up this fork of Big Leatherwood, but the Clover Fork section is Blue Diamond coming here from over in Bonneman, down below Hazard there. They came in from Bonneman and put that mine in, and I think it's 43 up there when they put the mines in. And Codell Construction done most of the great work. And they had down there where I met you all at that restaurant. They've changed a lot, but they had dwellings built there that people lived in, their workers and things, when they built that railroad up in here. This railroad wasn't built till later, but when they built these, put them mines in, we didn't have steel construction tipples. We had the old wooden tipples made out of 12 by 12s. And they didn't have no cranes. They had a thing they called a gin pole. It was a big winch on the thing there, and they'd pull a big, like a power pole up and guy it off, and that's what they picked them 12 by 12s, and they put that all them wooden tippers together with them that gin pole. Put the stuff up in them, and
Was it motorized?
it had a motor down here on this, and it run that big winch. The winch was geared off of the motor, and that the starting of it is. And then they was about in Leatherwood. I'd say there was 500 people, and nobody hardly had cars up there at that time. Just some had one hill we call Nylon Hill. That's where the bosses and some of the higher people, and the rest of it was they walked. They had a little walk path. They walked from them houses down to the store, and then when the fellas got out of the service, they had one row over there they called GI Row. And on that GI roll, it was mostly all the houses except Nylon Hill had outside toilets, I guess you might say.
Right.
And we had one guy, he had a truck, had him a big wooden box on that truck, and had an opening on the back. I don't know what he done with it, but we called that the honey wagon. And he had him a bucket and things that he'd go around to them and clean them. And we civilized people, but still we had outside toilets. But Nylon Hill had inside toilets. There's one building left up there yet. There's a woman lives in it with a woman. It was superintendent's house. It's got big white columns in front of it. I don't know if you all see it or not. Can't see it for the bushes, I don't guess. But they had different sections of it. Sugar bowl and all of that. And then Livingston, I don't know what, his last name was Livingston. He came in here with them out of, I guess, Virginia. We had a lot of people out of Tennessee, Virginia, and all come, like Bonnie Blue, all Blue Diamonds, old mines back there, and a lot of them come in here and, well, they worked here. Some of them passed away here and things and took them back. But that Livingston grade school, they had a grade school up there. And we got one out here, was the Delphia grade school. And after finally some of us in high school down here put in after leaving the grade schools because they had so many kids in that camp. And these other kids, we had grade schools in Daisy, grade schools in Little Leatherwood, and all around, and they stayed there for a while. Then they consolidated them all into Leatherwood. So we had from first grade all the way through high school, 12th grade. So then they kind of started a kindergarten class down there, but that section of old Blue Diamond people, I know, well, I watch on the computer a lot. You can get pictures. They showed pictures of the first grade work is in there done. And then they took other pictures of the things. People put pictures of the preparation plant. They built a new one across there, and I think they maybe got 1 or 2 people killed. It was a rope from one side of the mountain to the other. Then this crane traveled them ropes, and took that steel. He pick it up and carry it and put it in place, and hit when they built the steel structure, and it was 100 foot high. Yet the head houses had 2 head houses on it, we called them, and that's where them motors would pull that coal out of them bank cars out of mines and dump down in that, and then that would go down on a chain line or a belt line down into the plant. At that time, we had block coal, chunk coal, stoker coal, carbon coal, and nut coal.
What's the difference between them?
What's
the difference between them?
Well, your block coal would go in one car, it was a big block like that. Then your chunk coal would be they called it about that size. And then your nut coal would be about different grades. And then they had fine coal would be a stoker coal, and they call it. And then your carbon. And now that's a big thing. They want that carbon coal now, but then it was a hard seller. And they had little metal tags, aluminum tags, that they dropped down in them cars. Some people's has got them. They've saved them, found them and saved them. It's a little, what it was where he shipped it to Michigan or everywhere they could get coal freight. At that time they, have a hard time with coal sales and things. I mean, a lot of competition back in because you had a lot of different mines and things. And that's what destroyed the country. We got one big operator and he can mine the way he wants to. But
Was all that graded out by hand?
they had shakers and had screens in them shakers that as it went over that, it'd fall through different holes, and then they had different size screens and things, you see, as it went across, and it would grade the coal out. The block coal would take off and go into cars, and then the other just keep the screens would keep getting it out. And when I worked there, we had they called a kennel coal. And it was real hard and it was sharp. It would cut you just like a knife blade. And we had specialties on it. It would, these little gondola cars, then I don't see them no more. I'm on the track now, but they said they sent it to, I think it was Michigan or somewhere, and they'd put it in a 10-pound bag. The bag was treated, and they'd chip it up, and you'd take that, just all you had to do is light your bag, and it would sit, the coal was it would chip, fly all over you if you wasn't careful. And it was a good, and they used it for campers and things like that. We've hand-picked it many times, put it in them gondolas and sent it out of here. So you had coal sales every way you could. Yeah.
And all this coal production was underground, right?
Yeah, they call it was called the Leatherwood seam. And this other one down here we call it, at that time they called it them Royal Diamond seam. It's down below us, down under us here. And then we got a Hazard 4 seam here. They're mining it different areas down on the river and trucking it back in here right now. But most are big men and Blue Diamond at that time, Bonneman and the other big shots. Ted Hems took over, and it was getting a little too costly. You had the big mining equipment, and it's going to have to reduce down to smaller equipment. Like these others. Well, these others got big miners now, but they can take top and bottom with it.
Yeah. They can take the rock with it, right?
Yeah, that's the reason we have a lot of these, slate dumps, I call them, or slurry ponds, or what you might call them, back on the mountain. About had to make a slurry pond because it a lot of water in it, it'd build up and things. And
how far back underground did you work?
Well, I was a construction crew. We built outside. I went down in the Royal Diamond mines. We had put in a pump line down there. And some of these other abandoned mines, we went back in there and pulled the steel and stuff out like that. Take a motor and take a nippy cable and put on a trolley pole, and you'd nip your motor back in there and get your steel and pull it outside. Then we'd load it in, and I hauled it from different, I'd haul it from different portal to portal, and then I started hauling it from here when Blue Diamond put the Scotia mines in. And I'd haul them a lot of steel over there and things on the little truck. And homemade trailer and things. Got by. Now, you can't get by with all that now. But at that time, I started at Leatherwood in '65, working with them up there. I worked for, they called it the Jewel Ridge Mine up here. And I thought it was Jewel Ridge Coal Company, but we got checked, but it was Stearns Mining who owned it at that time. It was just another subsidiary of Blue Diamond down the country. And
Blue Diamond was a big company.
it was a big company. It was a good company too. I mean, we made good money and everything. But
You talked a little bit about the community of Leatherwood, and we looked at some pictures a few days ago. You could see the big old hand-hewn rock buildings
yeah,
that were there. There was a gas station in front of one, and there's one up there that had rounded corners. Was that kind of the center of the community there?
well, Leatherwood was it was a little town. As I said, there's 500 people there. No vehicles much. There's a few vehicles, but we had in that one building, we had a movie theater, a Y they called it. You could get food in one end of the Y, had magazines, and anything like a drugstore. He'd had that in that Y, and he'd had doctor's offices, dental office, and downstairs we had a pool room, and the first post office down there was named Toner. It's someone in Blue Diamond Coal Company. Their name was Toner, and their name was Toner. But we had a beauty shop, barber shop, movie theater, Y, and upstairs above the Y we had a big, here over yonder big room that if somebody wanted to play live music, they had big things up there and stuff like that. And then they had rooms at one end of that they'd come in from Knoxville, and they could stay there. Had a place for them to stay, and they eat down at the Y and everything. And then over at the store, you down on the park, you had a grocery department down there. Well, your next apartment up where you could see some of them pictures where you come right off the road, come in there, that was hardware and clothing and all that. Then the next floor up was furniture. They had elevators that was rope driven. It'd take you up and down. And then they had later on they made offices in that one end there. But that's where you go get your payroll and things. If you wasn't script bound. The script, a lot of them work the way they'd work. They'd come to the store and trade their groceries out that day's work. And they had I think it was a little Ford pickup, had sideboards on it, and they'd load that pickup, put it in bags, and load that pickup in it. Then he'd drive around through the camp and deliver the groceries. They had them house numbered and everything. They'd deliver their groceries to that house and things, you see. And
Could you choose whether you got script or if you got paid in cash?
Well, you got paid at payday if you had enough cash saved up. But a lot of times, most of them, in script bound, they'd call it. They'd traded it all out, you see, and didn't have much of a payday. But the gas pumps was put in there, and about 70 something. Out next to the road, nobody's ever put much of a picture of the service station that sit out there. I mean, they had their own service stations and all. That Texaco was their big distributor. But somebody I know has got pictures of it, but I've not seen no pictures of it since they done that. But they was houses all over in mountains and things. And then they had one of the place there, they had a big boarding house. It was a good sized building too. I mean, big building. And a lot of these guys out of Virginia and places, they would come and stay there, and then maybe if they didn't work on weekends, they'd leave. But on top of the store building, they had a big light. And one section of that light was green, and one of it was red. And if he was going to work tomorrow, it'd be green. If it wasn't going to work, you'd have the red light. It would tell them, the fellow people, if they all they had to do was look up there and see if they's working tomorrow or what. And that was one way of communicating. And there wasn't that many, no cell phones and all of that. And there wasn't no actually many home phones. But then they had a big shop. When you went in there, they had a big central shop, kind of, we called it. And they had a blacksmith shop in it. And they had big turning lathes. They had their own machinists and their own welding people, and all the repair hydraulics and all that stuff. But they didn't have all these big miners and a lot of this big stuff. They had them Joy loaders or Goodman loaders or something that reached out here with the arms. They'd let that head down, them arms would pull the coal in. Like that. And that's some of the equipment they had. Their cut machines, they called them. He had a big cutter bar stuck out here on it, like that. And they'd walk up to the face of that coal, and they'd stick that big cutter bar in there, and it was, I think it's 12 foot. And they'd take that cutter bar and reach down to the bottom of that coal and cut that. Then this man had he called it a coal drill. And he would take that coal drill and go in there, and he'd had a big barrel on it. I think it was about 12 foot. He'd drill holes back in that coal. And then he would put his powder in there, and we had, at that time, a lot of them didn't do it, but we had sticks of, they called them clay, just round, just like dummies. They called them dummies. And he'd stick them dummies in there, had his tamping stick, and he'd tamp it, and then they would shoot that, and then that big loader just go up there and load it up. But I forgot to say there, when he cut the bottom, he could turn that cutter bar up sideways, and he'd go up one rib, and he'd back over here and go up, they called it the ribs, and he could cut that. So that block of coal was hanging there, and when they just busted it up, they'd put it that loader, put it in a shell car, and bring it up to they had a thing, a wooden ramp. And that wooden ramp, the track went right through the side of it. And this tram motors or motors, a lot of them, they'd come pull them cars through there, and they had a thing they called a yo-yo. And that coal, they'd unload on that yo-yo, and when it get to the middle of the cars together, that yo-yo would reverse. You could reverse it and keep it, and then quick as you pull the car through and under it, you could reverse it back, and it would fill your next car. And they just kept pulling the cars through there. And if it didn't have a motor, they had a big hoist they called a crab hoist. It was a big electric hoist, and they'd hook something to it and pull them if the motor wasn't around. so they keep production up, you see, and things like that.
So almost all of the coal went out of here on rail. They
And
didn't,
all
didn't
of it
truck any of it. All
There
of
were
it.
no trucks at that time, and between those buildings there, you're talking about them round corners and everything. They cut all that stone out of rock in that area that they built the buildings out of. And there's a guy called me one time about when they kind of about to close down thing, and he said, "What is this track done going up between these buildings here? What's that for?" I said, "Buddy, we didn't have all these vehicles at that time. No trucks. And what it was, a train would shove in boxcars. It went on above where we had that warehouse as one of them stone buildings and store over here. It went right up through there, and they had a mat made that they'd throw out there, and they could roll that stuff out of them cars, and then they had some rollers like their boxes of groceries. They had some had a curve. They'd set them boxes of groceries on that roller, and he'd roll, and they'd store their groceries and things under some of them. So it was just a little city of its own. That's what it was. Because you didn't have to go nowhere. You stay right there, your doctor's office and all that there. And it was
probably a pretty good deal back in the mountains here, wasn't it?
oh, good deal. Guy cut me one time. I've had plastic surgery 2 times, and took 100 and some stitches in my head and my face, and after he sewed me up right there.
You got in a fight and you got cut.
Well, there wasn't no fight to it. He was at the counter, and I walked up behind him, and he thought, bam, and he burst through a glass on my head, milk glass. And that was all of it then. But when I went in service, I got plastic surgery 2 times on it. I had growing keloids on my neck, so I was in limestone, Maine, and he'd get 40 below zero up there. So, if you didn't bundle up, you'd freeze. You had to watch for frostbite. But that mine, I think it went in 43, I believe is what it said. And about 44, 45 is when World War II ended. And that's the reason there was so many soldiers come there and wanted jobs. That's the reason they called that GI Road over on that one side. But they was high as 2 rows of houses on each side of that mountain back in there. It was a real, well, this is just a big city. That's all it was. Coal city.
We've been doing this recent job up on Clover Fork Road. You familiar with that?
Yeah.
That was part of the Blue Diamond mine right up in that road there?
Well, that mine come right back down that point from where it went in from the main head house. They drove right back down that point and under that mountain. And they had a pump set up above that there. We called it the Indian Grave Pump. And what that pump done, it pumped that water up out there and pumped it back to the mines for them to wash their coal and stuff with. And I'd say after the scripture and somewhere right on the other side of that point, it was called Lynn Fork. And that point comes right down here, and that's they mine down in there, and I'd say more than likely there's a reservoir down in there called that's where we pump water most of the time, all the way from there.
I think that might be the water that caused our landslide that we worked on.
It could be, because there was more people lived on down below there, just below the whiskey store. That water used to come out of there, and that's before we ever got any water in this country. And they had a water supply there year round, and I mean, quite a bit of water come out there. So they had a good water supply there, and I think some of them people there is still getting water out of the mines and things up there.
Do you have any idea how big the coal was up in there that they were mining?
I hit anywhere from 4 foot to, or better, 50 something. At that time, you didn't have a miner. You didn't reach up and take so much top or so much bottom. Most time when you cut it and cut the sides and things, if it didn't fall out, you had to top them while you had to anywhere from, I say, 4 foot to 50 inches of coal. Sometimes you'd have a kind of a roll and it'd be a deeper seam of coal. But that whole mountain back through there, well, they went, that mine's on, I was looking at the tipple going up the holler on the left-hand side. They came all the way back, well, we call it Big Laurel over here. They could come all the way back in there. There was miles and miles of track laying in them mines and things. And then on the right-hand side, it went down into Leslie County and down in Beach Fork section where they got the prep plant right now. It went down in them way down in them as far as the points, the mountain. They'd get right in the center of the mountain, you see, and that's where they made that's where their main headings was. Then they'd punch off and go out to the sides. And got there at the Leslie and Prairie line, they had some 6 main and things. They went down towards where like Felix Blevins lived, down way down through there and things. And because that's the way they do. We had one guy on this Royal Diamond Mines down here, Strunk feller come in here, and he hogged a lot of coal. And about 4 o'clock one morning, I got woke up by a big blast. And I was putting my shoes on to go check it out. Then another one hit jarred the glasses together in my cabinet. So I went on down to the mines. The guard said, "You're not supposed to come in here." I said, I was with the fire department then. I said, "There's some blasting going on. I need to know where it's at." "Oh, that's them strippers." I said, "No, the strippers don't shoot at 4 o'clock in the morning." And they brought me a seismograph up here and put it at the house, but it's already over with. But I found out later on that the fella told me, he said, "I drilled till a little after 12 o'clock. 2 overcast." Said, "I drilled them." And that's what they done after that. And they were only 9. I went to check the board, see how many people had to check in there. There was 9 people in there. And one lady down below me down here said she was laying on the couch, and her man, she said it bounced her off the couch, because I know it's a hard blast, but Strunk got by with it. He shot them 2 overcast out, and that was our ways, you know, going over the track and things. And so they had to, this bunch down here now had to drop over where the church house is down there. You've seen that. And they come up through and on that big point, and they stayed down this, had to drop over and come up. And we got some property in the Feedy Creek that they tried to mine from one side, got a foreman kill and things, and they quit. And they mined to it, and I was trying to lease it to them. They said, "We can't, it ain't been turned back over." So we got to block it. There's some coal there that's never be got now, because it's mined on one side and mined this side, and they pulled him back. So there it is. We've had to pay some environmental tax on something that it'd never be mined. But
We're talking about the check-in board. Tell us what that is.
it's a board on the wall, and you got a, like Army had a dog tag, and that's the way they done it here. They had a tag that you hung up there. When you went inside the mines, you had to hang that tag up to know that you was in underground. And he had a great big board there that every man had his tag, check-in tag. He had to put it up there. Just
So if there was an accident,
they know it was in there. Yeah. And like I say, at night that I went, morning that I went down there, there was 9 tags on there. And the security, I said, no, I said, that there's something here, but oh no. And the surveying man, I asked him, I said, I need a map. And he's down on Leslie County, your country, that's working for him at that time. And he never did give me no map. I wanted a map of the area of where, you know.
Carter, you've done a lot of stuff in your life.
Well, I've done some, you know, and very thankful that old man above has let me get this old to talk about it.
Looks like you're still doing some stuff. What do you do now?
Just pedal, cut grass, and after I retired and things.
Are you still on the fire department?
You see that thing on my belt there? Yeah, still got the fire department going. Right there. Me and my wife donated that property there to the fire department.
Yeah.
We bought it. But, and getting back to the Leatherwood school, the miners didn't make that much, but at that time, each miner had $2 cut out of his paycheck, every paycheck. And the miners at that time built that gymnasium on that school down there. And it was all dug, no backhoe digging on it. That you dug it by hand. And I get out of class many times, go out there and help dig footers for that thing. But now the coal miners back at that time was the ones that built that gymnasium. It wasn't built by no county or nothing. It was built with that. And then they came in, and I had pictures to get this new school, and they took part of the gymnasium for the school because the pictures I had, they wouldn't fix the roof on the other one. You know how flat roofs is. They had barrels to catch the water. And a lot of times it didn't do it. It'd taken the hardwood flooring would buckle and coming up and things. So the coal miners was the one built that big part of the big and bought the steel and stuff. Fix that. And it had hardwood floors in it, and it was a nice, one of the biggest gymnasiums, a lot bigger than the gymnasiums they got down in Prairie County for these kids to play on. But they made a lunchroom on the end of it and things, and added all that on it now.
And that was the Leatherwood School. What was the mascot? What was the team called?
Wildcats. Leatherwood Wildcats at that time. Yeah, we played some rough teams. Blackjack Mosley from Leslie County, you could watch him. If you sit there for a foul shot, before you know it, he'd he'd reach over and put that foot on you, keep you from jumping so high. I ain't gonna talk about these Leslie counties much.
It's good to get in.
And we certainly do appreciate you.
Well, I'm glad to do this. I might not give you too much, but I'll give you all I can.
How'd your family end up here?
Here,
How'd your grandpa end up here?
my dad, my grandfather and grandmother is buried in Jackson, Kentucky. My dad seen a killing in Jackson, and he knew what would happen. He knew he'd kill him. So that's when they were floating poplar logs only. They floating these logs out of here. We had splash dams, and my grandfather, Shepherd, and my grandmother was a Maggard out of Leslie County. They had property. They owned this property in the head of this holler here. And Swift Coal and Timber Company come in here and bought it for $1 and $1.50 acre. But my dad got with that crew just like a chuck wagon gang. They'd float the logs all the way to Irving and Ravenna down there, and then they'd come back and get others. And he got with him and come back in here after he seen that killing. He knowed what would happen to him. And he met my mother here, and I was born in 36, so they was in here way before then. And then I think I found some papers in my old trunk that my dad and her was appointed postmaster in 44 here at the Delphi post office. So that was ox teams at that time. That's what they had, ox that pulled the logs at that time. They didn't have no horses, it was all ox. My mother told me, said the only colored man was one colored man that come in here, and come a big storm, and he made his ox getting under a cliff. And they said, what in the world did you do that for? He said, that's my bread and butter. That was his bread, that's what it, and what was it, 50 cents maybe a day that they got for working in? Everybody didn't, all of them got that. And then we used to have a little dinky train, we called it W.M. Ritter Lumber Company. It's actually, it looked like one of these Dolly Parton trains, you know, what they have on them places. That's kind of little, it might have been a little bigger, but track went right over there, right down. Most of the track laid right in the edge of the creek or went through the creek or something. It just built up, and they had, they went across here and went across the mountain down into Letcher County with that, and well, they'd take a train and push in one pull, and they'd bring maybe 2 or 3 cars and park them on, and the cars had a little dog down here on it. You didn't have the air brakes or none of that. You had to get out there, the brakeman did, and tighten him up when he's coming down off of that. And we had one little man had a little mines up here, Enoch Shepherd, mine coal for W.M. Ritter. And he had a chute built out there, and they'd pull up to that chute, and the coal would fill a tender up. They call it a tender, that box behind where the engineering was there, where he could shove it out and shove it in that fire box. And they hauled logs out of here down to Daisy. And W.M. Ritter Lumber Company had a big mill down there. They made hardwood flooring. They had dry kilns. It used to be, that was another little town. Daisy was, they called it. It was more of a logging town. And that's what they had there. But this was wilderness back in here. I stomped a many with a toe and cow hunted Someone said, what kind of farm you live on? I said, well, all we done then is turned our cattle loose in the head of this holler. When I got out of school, me and my nephew would go back and hunt our cattle and bring them in. And it's milking time, and we had quicker school got out because milking time you had to milk them before dark, and you had to get them in. We'd gather them, bring them all, walk them in and things. So that's
Your parents were the postmasters
Yeah.
here.
yeah.
Is that at Leatherwood or yeah?
Delphia.
Delphia. Sorry.
Yeah. Leatherwood. This is main Leatherwood right here. That's Clover Fork down there where the mines went in. But they had, I forget how many different. Turner was the first, and then they named it again, and then they finally named the post office Leatherwood. But this little grade school out here was donated by my grandfather, Shepherd. He was smart enough, and he had it put in the deed that if ever unexisted to be in a school, it dropped back to his heirs. And he's been dead for years and years. And my brother, one of my brothers, got all this together, had all the deeds together, and they closed the school. And when they did, I had uncles in Indiana, aunts in Florida, West Virginia, and we had to send them deeds. He sent all them deeds, each one of them, and all they had to notarize and come back. Then the Board of Education in Hazard, he went down there. He said, he had the old deed. They said, boys, that's what it says. It comes back to his heirs. So the first school, I think, was a log school. And then went from that to a little more modern, but he heated by a big pot belly stove. One of them, it's a great big one. And people built fires there, and some of them got nickel a day to build a fire. They'd have to come to school early to have the fire warmed up because no buses, you walk to school, winter time, summertime, and all. You might come in with your pants up to about wading the snow up to your knees, and your pants leg froze, but you done that. And I never seen it, but my mother told me about her mailman. He came in here, he brought her mail in on a mule. And she said when he'd pull up to the store, they'd take a hammer, claw hammer, and go out there and break his shoes loose off them metal stirrups, break the ice loose. That mule feet throwing that watered stuff up, and his feet would be froze in the stirrup. So that was back in the elderly days. Yeah, but that's a big thing. That's just where I say I've had a good life. Stumped a few toes.
But other than your time in the service and a little bit of time away from here, you've lived your whole life.
Lived my
here.
whole life right here.
So,
Well, pulled 3 years in the Army, and I think it maybe 6 months. I'm gonna give it a year in Chicago, and it whipped me. Chicago did. So I come back here and worked. I was getting $1 air and working around the sawmill, off bearing, and he didn't have the rollers. You got a hold in there quick as that blade started hitting that, got out there enough till you get a hold of it. You got a hold of it right then, and that sawdust sometimes burn you up. And it was a job. You made money, but you didn't have to pay. That car right there, I got covered up. First new car I ever bought. '66 Dodge Cornett. $2,400 is what it cost me. And so I've had a good life. That's all it is. Been good to me. I ain't had that much sickness and things. But I'm the living person of P.H. Press Hall. I'm the baby, and I'm the only one living out of the family.
Wow.
So they've all. I got some nephews and nieces and different ones, but most of my dad's brothers homesteaded in the Ozarks in Arkansas. Halls and things they left out here, and some Cornetts migrated down in around Berea. And that was some of my cousins too. So, and my aunt Hannah, she married a back in Breathitt County, and they lived in Breathitt. But I had Aunt Polly, and she married a Cornett, and they moved kind of down into around Berea and then down in that country down in there. So I've homesteaded, I guess, here she might call it.
That's good. We sure do appreciate you sharing with us.
Well, I'm glad to do that. I might not give you too much information on it, but
I've enjoyed it myself, and if you'd like to, we'll see if we can get you a copy of this. Would you like
well,
to?
I'd like to have a copy. That had to be Indian country up there where that mines was, because they found a lot of Indian artifacts in behind the warehouse. There's a big cliff there, and they found a lot of arrowheads and bones and things. I think he done a lot right under that cliff. Security had to get after fellas for digging after the artifacts and things. Now I don't know. Some of them said that they slipped back in there and said they had a shoebox, had all that stuff in them shoeboxes. So that laurels and all that back in there, it was I guess desolate country at that time. But W.M. Ritter Lumber Company logged a lot of this out in here. They had one log down here, they had to burst it open, shoot it, bust it open. It was so big. That Lynn Fork, you call it down in there.
They had to shoot it with dynamite.
Had to shoot it with dynamite, burst it open, and load half of it on them little cars that they had. So that was a big band meal that they had down there at Daisy. And when the steam engine is what brought everything up in here at that time. We didn't have a diesel engine. And down there at Cornishville, there's a turntable, they call it down there. You know, the steam engine had to be turned around. They'd get on that thing, he'd turn them around, and they'd hit them, push your cars in or something like that.
So they burn coal and heat the water.
Yeah.
And make the steam to run.
They had their own, I call them graders. It was operated with steam too, and it would our steam one, and it would take and had a blade on each side, and they clear their tracks with them and things, and he'd kind of they wheel turn it back on the sides kind of. And another thing I can remember when the county come in here, used to come in, had a little D3 dozer. Big old fat man sitting on that little dozer, and he'd just say cluck, 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 cluck. And this other fella, you've seen these graders that somewhere that got the big wheels on them. He's standing on that, and he'd raise his blade up and down, or he could turn it every which way he wanted to.
That dozer pulled that grader, right?
That little D3 pulled that. You hear he'd pull that thing, that filler behind it with what roads we had then wasn't much. You gravel, you bursted rock up, putting mud holes and things. You didn't have all this white limestone gravel and stuff it you got now.
Is life easier these days than it was back then?
Why no? You got so much junk you have to be put up with. Someone back in told you something. It was gospel, Bible. I mean, you could say yes, sir, and it was what he told you. That was it. Like these politicians now, they'll look at you and tell you, yeah, but they don't come through.
Thank you so much, Carter.
Well, appreciate it, boys.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I wish I known more.
I'd say you do.
Well, this old head don't remember a lot of stuff right now.
I'm glad that Wally knew for us to come and hunt you up.
Take care of him, boys.
He worked so hard back in, and we need to take care of him now, right?
Well, Mr. Eastern was over the college crew, and he made them paint. They painted the camp houses. They cut bushes in the right of ways when some of them didn't slip a deck of cards, and they'd sit and play cards half a day. And they'd hear him coming, and man, they'd get up and cut the tar. They'd cut a whole bunch of bushes, and then they'd take their break if they heard him coming. One crew, was you in on that? Painting houses. Two of them would work first part of the morning, and the other two would sleep. And then in the evenings they'd work, and the other two would sleep in.
I'm not going to admit to that.
Huh?
I'm not going to admit to that, but I was probably one that done that.
Yeah, it's a. Oh, it was. Well, some rough times, yeah. I worked one shift. We had a belt broke, and hit the broke. I got home, worked today, got home that evening, sit down at the supper table, and that belt broke. We went out that night and worked. You know when the belt line went over the highway.
Yeah.
We worked all night. About 4 o'clock the next morning, we got that belt spliced back together and got the tipple operating. Because they couldn't operate, they didn't have these big stockpiles and things at that time. And they had to, and he was about blocked off. And we got it going because he'd locked up in that head drive till, or we have pulled it out. We used the old half track, you remember?
Yeah.
Hook that half track to it and pull it, and then we'd have to change the reverse polarity on juice on the belt. You'd goose it one way and get it tight, and then you'd have to change it again and back the other way. So it was 4 o'clock in the morning. It got 4 below zero. But we had his belt done, and Earl Forrest was the superintendent. Next morning he said, boys, I don't care what your boss says. You got me back on production. You go down there to the Y. If you want steak for breakfast, you tell them. They'll go to the store and get you the meat for you. Ever what you want. He said, you all sit there and warm up if it takes you to 11 or 12 o'clock. But I don't care what your boss said. I'm the superintendent. And we didn't fudge on him, but we stayed down there and warmed up because it was a bad job that night. That cold, that old belt real stiff and things. But we got him back on. That was a lot of our jobs was if they had trouble or something. They finally went to stacker belts. We had to work on them things.
Hold on.